In this lesson, I just want to go and talk about CSS units. So I created a new file here and I named it CSS units. So you can actually do that by clicking on our Visual Studio Code here and try to look for the new file option. So inside of it, I'm going to create a simple template for HTML5. And inside of that, we can actually create a div element with the parent class name and multiply it to 2. So at least we can have at least 2 div elements, and this one I'm going to rename it child, and I'm going to place it inside of this parent element and then save it. And then inside of this, I would want to change the title here and place the name here and replace it with CSS units. So let me save that. Now what I want to do here is to create a style tag that will contain CSS declaration for with the background color blue for the parent element, div element, and a height of at least 100 pixels and width of at least 100 pixels. So if we go and try to save that and then try to open it in our Explorer here and then open our CSS units, we can see that we were able to create a simple box with a background color of blue. Once you hear the term CSS units, it can be severally different units for expressing a length. So there are a lot of CSS properties that will be taking a length, such as font size, margin, padding, width, as we've discussed in the padding lecture that we've had, and even margin, as you can see in our document here. We were able to discuss in our lessons here the CSS units for padding 2 pixels. Okay, so the idea here, guys, that a length is a number followed by a unit such as 10 pixels, 2 em, etc. So it can be a pixel, it can be an em, it can be a rem. Okay, so white space will not be appearing between the number and the unit. If we try to go to our document here and we can try to look up our values that we've given here, there's no white space in between the value 20 and the CSS unit, which is pixels here in this example. So we don't have any white space there. But if you go and apply zero value, let's say we replace this with zero value, that will be okay. Okay, you don't need to declare the unit anymore. So that will still be understood by the browser that we would want to go and remove the padding for our styling. As you can see here, it was applied and it was understood by the browser that we just wanted zero padding. So let me just go back and put those 20 pixels again. So at least we are now more aware that we can actually use CSS value, a number here, plus the unit that we maximize, or the length value here that is pixels for this example. So some CSS properties can be given negative lengths, and there are 2 types of lengths for units. One can be absolute and the other one can be relative. When you say absolute lengths unit or units, they are fixed, and a length that is expressed in any of these types of units will be appearing as exactly that size. Absolute length units are not recommended for use on screen because we know that there are a lot of different devices that has different screens, such as mobile phones, tablets, laptops, and just remember that the absolute length can be recommended if your output medium is known, such as, for example, if you're going to be preparing for a print layout. Just so that we will be aware of the different units here, I actually prepared here for the absolute lengths here some examples, so at least you would know that this is the values that you can expect, that you can use. Okay, let's go and open up our blue document here and refresh this. So at least you'll have an idea that these are absolute lengths. So H1, absolute lengths. So we can have an idea on how they will look on our screen. I actually prepared here a list of the classes here. I've already pre-typed them, so at least I don't need to retype them anymore. So 1 centimeter, 1 millimeter, 1 inch, 1 pixel, and 1 point. So if I refresh this, you would see that here is how it will be looking on the screen. So that's how it will be shown on our screen: a centimeter, a millimeter, an inch, and you would see that 1 point and 1 pixel is very, very small, and 1 picas. So when we say relative lengths, on the other hand, this will be the better option for us when we are designing our sites, because relative lengths or relative length units will be specifying a length relative to another length property. So relative lengths scale better between different rendering mediums. The EM and the REM units are the most practical in creating perfectly scalable layout for our websites. Now let me just go and remove this, guys. So at least I'm going to comment this out. At least when I save this and I allow you to download it, you will have an example here for your reference of this lesson. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to be copying and pasting this content here. Control A, Control C, and place it here. So at least you will have an example for the relative lengths, and we will be able to view them when they are played or when they are rendered in our browser here. So these are the examples of relative lengths, and as I've said, the most usable relative lengths that we can commonly use for scalability will be the REM and the EM. So let me just go and put here, we have the REM. I wasn't able to put the REM here. So REM, font size 1 REM. Save it and then try to refresh this, and we can see that these are the relative lengths and how they will be shown on the browser. I'm hoping you're getting the idea here, everyone, and that relative lengths are much better when it comes to scalability purposes. If, for example, you would want to have your website to have a scalable layout, it will be better if you use relative lengths. And REM is one of the best font relative unit that I usually use for responsive web design, especially if you're going to be refactoring your code from pixels to REM. Now that we are more familiar with this, let's go to discussing a topic about how we can go and maximize the use of absolute and relative lengths here. So we have here a blue box, and I just want to go and make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to replace this with 200 pixels, and refresh. Now we have a bigger box here, and let's say we would want to go and create a smaller box with the background yellow. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to select the child element here. So I'm going to create a child class here, and then I'm going to create a background color with yellow, and then height 100 pixels and width 100 pixels. So if we go and refresh this, we can see that there will be a smaller box here that will be the same height and width from the previous size of the blue box that we've created. You will see that it's the exact size from 100 pixels from the height, which is the vertical line here, and 100 pixels from left to right here, from top to bottom, left to right. One of the easiest units to use in relative units will be the, let me just delete the width here and then use the 50% relative unit, the percentage unit here. You would see that this will be occupying 50% of the box here, the height of the box. So if I refresh this, let me just save this and then refresh, you would see that it occupied half of the box. Now if we go and try to give it a 50% width here, let me just go and type that here, 50% width. Let's see what will happen. we can now see that we have 50% of the height from top to the half of the box and 50% of the width of the box. This is the easiest way for us to understand on how the percentage unit can be used as a relative unit. You would see that if we apply 100% of the width, it will cover the blue box from the left to the right. So if I'm going to change this to 100% and then refresh it, you will see that it covered from the left to the right side of the box here. And if we go and try to change the width to 125%, let's see what will happen. If I go change this to 125, okay, and refresh, you will see that it overlapped the box, the blue box, the parent element. This is because the child element is related to the parent element, and we gave it 125%. That means that's more than the width of the parent element. So if we bring this back to 100% and refresh this, we can see that it goes back to the complete box here. It was able to fit the size of the parent element. If we add a padding here, as we all know, in the box model, it will be applied from the inside of the element. So let's say we have 25 pixels of padding here. You will see that it will be overlapping our blue box here. And if we go here in our child element and place some text here, so let's say I have a P element that contains a hello world text and refresh it, you would see that we have a padding of 25 pixels from the top and 25 pixels from the left, right, and bottom. Fix for this problem will be to use the box sizing property. And we can put here border box, and you would see that it will no longer overlap. Our child element will no longer overlap the parent element here, and it will be still retaining the padding 25 pixels that we have applied for the top, right, bottom, and left sides of the element. So as a conclusion to this lesson, absolute lengths are pertaining to fixed length, and it is not related to any element. As we can see here, if we give this a 125 pixels, it will not be related to any element. It will not be related to the size of the blue box here. So if we say relative lengths on the other hand, and we use the percentage relative length property, it will be related to another length property of another element. So here on this case, we would want to give this 100% of relative length to the width property of the child element here to the width of the parent element, and if we save this, you would see that it will occupy the 100% of the width of the parent element. Just remember that the relative length can be related through the parent element, as we can see here. It can be related through the declared font property of a certain element, or the viewport dimension of our document. So we can see here viewport width, viewport height. If we try to look at the definitions that I've pasted here in our examples here, we would see here in some of the description that the EM is related to the font size of the element. We have the viewport width, which is related to the 1% of the width of the viewport. VH will be relative to the 1% of the height of the viewport. I'm hoping you got the idea here. So we also have here rem, which is relative to the font size of the root element. This will be very useful, especially for responsive web design. This is not a responsive web design course. I'm just giving you the idea here so at least you would know. As I've told you guys, know, understand, remember, and then apply. That's my goal here, to introduce to you some of the HTML elements that you can maximize and use in building your projects. If you're interested in learning more about responsive web design, I would really recommend that you go check out a course that I will be building in the future for responsive web design, and I'm hoping you will be interested in getting that course based from the outputs and your evaluation of the course that I've built for you here for the HTML fundamentals.